Hey, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's installment of Coffee Chats. We are so excited to be talking to 4 panelists today about public speaking tips and booking gigs. Now, this can apply to a variety of creatives, but this is especially important for authors to get the word out about their book and their big idea. Once again, I am one of your hosts, Mackenzie Finklea.
And I am Kyra Dawkins. So first and foremost, we want to allow some of our panelists to join us in this incredible space. So to start, we will invite. Hello. Would you like to introduce yourself to this illustrious audience?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashlea Hearn, and I'm the author of the book Genesis Mortalis, a fiction novel.
We're so happy to have you here, Ashlea.
Thank
and
you.
Another panelist we'd like to invite into this coffee chat space. Dun, 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 dun.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Ivanecky, and I'm the author of the book The Child in Us, a collection of stories about happiness. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. I'm so looking forward to asking you guys some of our questions today. You know, this is a topic that is of deep interest to me. It's something I've tried to dabble in as well. So I'm interested to hear about your experiences, how you book gigs, do you get paid for them, what kinds of gigs you do, etc. So to kick things off, would love to ask the question, and you guys feel free to bounce off of one another. Feel free to answer. That doesn't matter who goes first, who answers the question. This is just open dialogue. How do you reach potential speaking engagement? How do you research potential speaking engagement opportunities? That is the question.
Yeah. Elizabeth, do you want to go first?
Sure. So yeah, how I research potential speaking engagement opportunities is so I'll use hashtags, on social media, so on LinkedIn or Instagram, and look for and I type in hashtags that big theme ideas for my book. So my book was a collection of stories about happiness, so I can use the hashtag happiness and look for those kind of podcasts. And then after, I also listen to the podcast as well, just to get a good idea of what the podcast is about and if it correlates with the vision of my book, because I think that's very important. The other thing too is that I did do some speaking engagements in person, so I do have kind of advice there too. Is just so with word of mouth, I just mention. I think the main thing is just mentioning mentioning your book in in social circles, and just you never know who you're gonna meet and who you're gonna talk to. So I would say just mention it whenever you feel there might be someone interested. So yeah, I would say that there. And yeah, I mean, it's also reading the room too. So seeing if people are interested, and if they are, then yeah, you go and yeah, you can talk more in depth about it. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Hello.
I am muted. I was muted the whole time.
You are muted.
I'm pulling in another panelist from the wings here who just arrived. Khadijah, welcome.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
We would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we are currently talking about how do you research potential speaking engagement opportunities. So would love to hear your introduction and then your thoughts on this question.
Okay, my name is Khadijah Wynter. I recently published a book called Mafia Princess. I'm from Florida. What I've learned throughout the publishing process, that you can't be scared to reach out to people when it comes to potential speaking engagements, or sometimes if you have something in common with someone, it kind of opens the door to allow them basically to connect with you, and then you'll have the opportunity to, try to set something up to speak, because I've learned that kind of have helped me. I recently did a podcast interview about different types of basically mental illnesses, so to speak, that a lot of people go through, especially people in the creative world. Um, so she was sharing with me that she had depression and it was hard to sometimes write or go to speaking engagements with depression. And I'm like, wow, I have social anxiety. So sometimes it's hard for me to reach out to people or go to different avenues to basically connect with people because of social anxiety. So that was one type of way I was able to kind of like open the door to connect with someone that I had something slightly in common with, and that it led to her asking me to be on her podcast.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that, off of the first two. I definitely agree. I think personal connections work a lot better as far as getting speaking events. I originally started off trying to use Instagram, like Bookstagram and stuff, but then you kind of get a lot of those spam accounts where you don't really know the difference between real ones and fake ones. And so I have gotten one event that way, but it took like going through a lot of people where it was kind of just a waste of time almost. But I've definitely found my more beneficial connections have been finding myself an author mentor and actually engaging with her. And she runs a podcast. So I pretty much ended up connecting with her because of how much I loved her podcast. And then a year later, after staying in connection with her, I ended up being featured on her podcast. So those connections go a long way. And then also, I met a friend through her who is another author and also a client of hers. And I ended up being on that lady's podcast too, just from having that personal connection with them. So I would definitely say that's the best way to book gigs for sure.
I think something that all of you guys have really pressed into as you've developed your illustrious speaking engagement careers is the importance of human connection and human interaction. And it seems that you've been able to gain these connections predominantly through relationships. But I guess my question, you guys have already started to lean into this, but our next question for you guys would probably be like, how do you pitch yourself to be a speaker? Naturally, some of this might be a little bit not easier, but if you already have a relationship with the person that you're approaching, the process might be a little bit different. But how do you curate that language to share what you would like to say on that platform?
I'll start off again. So I feel like honestly pitching yourself to be a speaker as a fiction writer, you're less pitching what your book is sometimes and more pitching your story of like how, like I've always wanted to be a writer since I was really young. So I always try to lead with that story. And I feel like people resonate more with that kind of passion than just like, oh, I have another fiction book and here's what it's about. Just because there are so many other fiction books, there's so much competition. So you really want to pitch yourself almost rather than your book.
I have to agree with you, because it can be hard trying to pitch your book. I learned that the hard way. I was trying to basically book a speaking engagement based on the fact that I was a fictional author, and the podcast mostly features fictional authors. And I got a question that threw me through a loop, and it was, well, what can you bring to my podcast that other people can't? So I think more so of pitching yourself. Why did you wrote your book? Or what do you love about writing? Or what made you take the step to write your book? Or how did you feel when you finally accomplished writing your book? Stuff like that will basically set you apart. Instead of just saying, hey, I have another fictional book. Why don't you try it?
Yeah, and how can you help them, and how can you like cater
Mhm.
to their audience and their
And
audience's
yes,
expectations?
and what you bring to the table, or some potential topics you can speak about.
So what is the answer to that question for you? What could you bring to the podcast?
So I took a day to ponder. I'm not gonna lie. And then I was like, you know what? I can basically bring a different image of what an author is. Because after watching a few of his video podcasts and listening to the ones that was available, um, I don't want to say they were pitching a false image of an author, but it was mostly people who already had their ideal down pat. They already knew the avenue they wanted to take, far as the book. They had everything outlined, and that wasn't it for me. I had to take the time to, once I came up with the topic, figure out how I wanted to go. So I kind of wanted to bring a fresher image of what an author is. Like, we don't have it all figured out. We don't know potentially how we want our book to go. Sometimes randomly we will get an idea and then think like, hey, that's a good idea. I'm gonna add it. Um, we're definitely not perfect, and we all come in different shapes, different sizes, different ethnicities, and there's no one that's perfect that's an author. And even you have authors that has depression, schizophrenia, bipolarism. No author is perfect. So I pretty much just pitched that, hey, I just want to show them a different view of what an author looks like.
Yeah, I would say too. I agree with what has been said already as well. But I would say another thing to keep in mind is I guess letting like podcast hosts or but I guess just to broaden it, letting like your audience get to know you also as a person too is important in building those connections. Because I know that even on social media, you can be talking about your book and your I guess author journey, but I think it's refreshing too to show that you have you're more than just an author as well, and kind of show your other interests, show I guess other things that are important to you, um, so not just writing, because you know of course you know myself, like writing is one of my greatest passions, but there are other things that I'm also passionate about too. So I think showing that to your audience is important, because it helps them to relate to you. So that's what I would say.
Relatability is huge.
Yeah, I think that's something that all of you guys really stress, is that we as authors are whole human beings. Like, of course, our books are a part of who we are, but we are whole humans. Like, with all of the complexities and the flaws and the beauty, etc., etc. But
Agreed.
I really appreciate the emphasis on that, because that in and of itself really does help in navigating and embracing a speaking engagement, because not only do you have the opportunity to talk about your book, but you have the opportunity to share an aspect of your humanity.
I really like that. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
So I do have a follow-up question for you guys. 4. We've been talking a lot about podcasts, especially as speaking engagements. I'm curious to know what other kinds of speaking engagements you guys have been doing.
Something that I had done was I was speaking with a book club, local book club. The book club, they decided to read my book one of the months, and then they invited me that month to kind of discuss my book too, and ask me some questions about it. So that was a really fun time, and it was really heartwarming just to see, just to hear, like someone had said that they felt like they already knew me just from reading my book. So I really like those kind of comments, and it just goes to show too that you really like don't know how much of an impact your writing has on your audience until you talk with them. And I think it's important to talk with them, right? Because it's not just it's not just I guess the author the author pens the book, and then the audience and the readers would read it, but it kind of the stories and I guess the stories don't just stay on the page. They kind of that reader then carries those stories with them, so then it becomes something living, I feel. And then you kind of, the reader then adds to the story too, and that's how it keeps I guess your vision alive too for the book. And that's how so I think these kind of I think these moments help to like breathe life to the words that you wrote, and then they stay in the hearts of the reader.
Yeah, I would say, so I'm on the West Coast in Seattle, so our in-person events have been kind of non-existent even now, but I do have some upcoming gigs that are being planned. So I have one book signing and reading at Barnes & Noble coming up in December here for the first time, and I've been like trying to speak with these guys for like months. So we're just now getting around to it, but I do think being able to have that in-person connection will be a lot more beneficial, and just being able to connect with people in person over my book is really great, just because doing the virtual events, I haven't really been able to speak with my readers themselves. I've just been able to speak with actual like hosts and stuff. So yeah, I'm ready to start getting into those in-person events. Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally agree. I am really looking forward to getting to do more and more of those again. I've definitely done a couple book signings, but I miss the before the pandemic when I was doing full on signings with little speaking events and Q&As and the whole bit. The signing is a little bit more distance, right? We've got another panelist here in the wings that I'm going to pull in, and I would love for her to introduce herself. Traci, welcome to the party.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, I'm sitting in a conference center in San Diego in the corner. So hopefully my audio doesn't go out. But I think one of the reasons why Mackenzie pulled me in is because I am a news anchor, news reporter. And one of the things that I always talk to people about is sort of looking beyond even a podcast, which is fantastic. And I've done a few and they're amazing. But they are also local TV stations who love book writers. I mean, they eat it up. So you can be on any Saturday morning, Sunday morning, even on the weekday mornings are usually better. They save the hard news for the evenings, but when I used to anchor the morning show, we get no less than 30, 40 books a week. And we were ecstatic because it's hard to fill a newscast on the weekend mornings, right? It's hard to fill a newscast on the morning anyway. So we would love to have those guys come in, talk about their books. Usually we would do it right before a book signing or a book tour, or if they're, not local, they're going to be in the area. So it's so easy to send it to the morning editors. You can call any TV station and say, hey, who are your morning editors? Send each person a book and ask to be on. So I've done that, and I have a few more things coming up in that area. And the beauty of that is, people are watching newscasts, so it's easy to have like this amazing audience of all of these TV folks. And off of that, you normally have other stations pulling you in, or other organizations. Like I did one TV show for someone, and now I'm doing a church event, which I never thought I would be doing, but I am, just from that. And they ended up buying, I think they bought 20 books, and I'm on the hook for 50 more books for another organization. So it's just that's one way to build a business. Mackenzie, let me know if I'm missing anything. Uh-oh, I lost you guys for a second.
No, you're fine. We can hear you.
Okay,
fantastic.
I was muted.
Oh,
That's why
nice.
Kyra was pointing. I did it again. Thank you, Traci. All of that information was very helpful. I would not have thought to reach out to my local TV station. Like,
Yes.
They want me on their show? Incredible.
Well, think about it. They have to fill time. I mean, it's a great way to do it. I also, I work with a lot of local organizations, and it's word of mouth as well, right? Once you get on the TV station, the other people pick you up. I have a local bookstore that I'm going to be working with in New Orleans, and they requested 50 copies of the book. And I'm also doing a women's foundation conference, and they wanted, we're still working out the details for this one, but they're asking for 500 copies. So you never know where that's going to lead, just having that exposure. So I think sometimes you need to think outside of the box and not just what you know.
Absolutely. So this, not related to TV, but we were talking about podcasts, thinking outside of the box. I want to pull this question up because I think it's an interesting one. Should we focus on getting on podcasts, or just saying screw it and developing our own podcast? What are y'all's thoughts on this? Especially Ashlea, I'd love to hear from you and your mentor, who does in fact have their own podcast.
I personally, right now in my own book journey, I am not interested in developing my own podcast, just because there's just so many other things that I feel like I'm focusing on. So I think it's a tricky question. I think if you genuinely have like some kind of path that you want to go down with the podcast, then I think you should do it. But I haven't really found even like what I would do if I had a podcast. Like I'm kind of going through the same steps of developing a blog right now. And as a fiction writer, I'm like, do I limit myself to just talking about my books as like fiction books, or like, do I open that up? Like, I'm still even trying to figure out that route. So for me personally, no, I am just focusing on getting on podcasts, definitely. And I know my mentor has definitely, her advice to me has been, you need to write a nonfiction book because that's where all of the money is. And that's where you're definitely gonna, she's very nonfiction heavy. And I was probably the first fiction writer on her podcast, which was like awesome. But yeah, I don't think I would really have anything to go off of right now. Yeah.
What an interesting thought, because nonfiction, it also just really depends on what you're writing about,
True.
in terms of where the money is, right? Because I also,
True.
a lot of what I see on Bookstagram is all fiction books. So in my mind, I'm like, that's where the money is. Why did I write nonfiction? I should go do fiction. Grass is greener and all that.
I think in the sense, I think in the sense that you have more of a niche to to really dive into if you're a nonfiction writer. Whereas with fiction, there's so many different fiction books. I feel like there's just so much more competition, honestly, and to like set yourself apart as a fiction writer. I don't know. I found it a little bit harder to do, but I'm still in the early stages. So yeah.
For me, it was about time. Like the thought has crossed my mind, but unfortunately, I don't have the time between working and I was finishing school, and then everything for my book. It was more beneficial for me to just be featured on other people's podcasts. Like I had two best friends who have podcasts, so I was blessed in that sense to have two people already lined up to do a podcast with, and watching them develop their podcast and all the work they had to put into it. It was one of those things where I want to do it, but I don't have the time, nor do I have the patience to do it right now.
Honestly, patience with
Yes,
editing. Anytime I go on a podcast and then I go and I listen to it later and I'm like, wow, they made me sound really good. Like they edit and they refine, and I'm just like, I don't have time for that.
exactly. If you do have the time and you know the route you want to take your podcast on, I do encourage you to do it, but make sure you have the time because you don't want to start something, get a group of listeners who like it, and then all of a sudden you have to stop cold turkey or you have to stop
Yeah.
for a while.
Mm-hmm. Maintenance. Ooh, sometimes we forget how much that takes.
Exactly.
That actually, so now I feel like I'm just going to find segues wherever I can find them. Maintenance and preparation. How do you prepare for a speech? That is the question at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts?
So quickly, I just want to add like a quick nuance to this question too. Like,
Yeah.
as you prepare for a speech, do you have like a base speech that you just change slightly depending on the platform, or do you like craft a speech directly in response to the platform? Like, is there like a raw base material that you work from, kind of like a template? But yeah, that's kind of just building off of the preparation piece.
So for me, I try to tailor my speeches to the podcast because you don't want to have a podcast that's talking about, say, for instance, fictional writing and where you get your inspiration for the book, and then get on the podcast about, let's say, anxiety and how to overcome that for writing. You don't want to use the same speech for two separate topics. So I pretty much tailor my speeches based on the podcast and based on the questions they send me, and then go from there.
Also, something that comes to mind with preparing for a speech is if it's a so it depends what it is, because if it's a podcast, I definitely like to meet with the podcast host to kind of build a little bit of rapport before the show or the talks or the episode rather, so that I'm not don't have like the initial nerves or that sort of thing. So I think building a rapport between the host is good. So maybe having at least one conversation before you do the episode. So that would be a way to prepare for sure. But the other thing too is and then I think for me the goal with like a podcast show is to kind of have more of a conversation, to make it be more like a conversation. So that's why I said part of the preparation I think for me is having that conversation and trying to build a little bit of rapport before the episode. But then, I mean, if you're going to talk in front of a group of people, then I wouldn't say I have a base speech. I'm kind of like worried that I'll forget. I know myself. I'm worried that, oh, hold on, I messed up a line. And then, so I kind of have just points and ideas and then just go from there. So I find I'm better if I'm more natural. So just kind of speak from the heart and try not, this kind of defeats the purpose of the question, but try not to prepare as much.
I mean, you're right. It really depends on what it is, because I would agree with you that I tend to not prepare as much for podcasts because I like everything to be very conversational. Yeah. I liked it to not seem like I'm reading from a script. Like, they sent me the questions ahead of time and then I typed out my responses and I'm just reading them. I don't want to do that. But when it comes to things like, I did that TED Talk that one time, not related to my book. This is pre-book. But when I did that, that was something that I prepared so much for. That was something that was like, I wrote down an entire script and I rehearsed the script and I learned the script backwards and forwards. And then you get up on the stage, you say it, and then you leave. It's just a very different type of speaking event than like a podcast or even like a Q&A or a workshop. Or a, what's the word? A conference session. That's very different too.
I would just add on to that. I think one helpful thing that I did when I first was doing my first speaking things was I filled out and I looked over my author one pager. So that's something that like was so helpful the first time. And like after you use it the first time, you're so good at it. After that, I feel like you don't really need it anymore. But I do think that's one great thing that New Degree Press helped us with, was building that author one pager so that we could use that for events.
The other thing I thought of, this just kind of goes back to like elementary school and high school, really, when I was preparing for speeches, is literally just get into the zone mentally. So, just try to relax yourself as much as possible before the event, the speaking event. So, reminding yourself to breathe, and even during the event too, right? Because sometimes you catch yourself, you're like, oh, shoot, like I've been talking for so long, I need to take a breath. So, doing those sort of checks, I guess, before the speech, but then during too. And also trying to speak slowly. I've gotten into the habit of trying to speak slowly lately, so that helps.
So this is a great kind of follow-up to exactly what you were just saying, Elizabeth. We've got a great question from the comments here. What if I have just terrible stage fright? Are there any techniques that we can use to bridge the fear of public speaking, which is huge? Is it still the #1 fear in the United States? Because that blows my mind every time I hear it. I'm like, you're afraid of public speaking more than like death? Or
actually over death. Actually more than death, which is
what about heights or falling?
Or knives or bugs?
So many things.
I don't know.
Murderers, serial killers.
There's so many other things.
Well, I think for a lot of people, though, it is a scary thought. And for me, I don't suffer from that, thank goodness. But I think if you can learn to enjoy the process, just like think of something that you already enjoy doing, right? If you can, I always say, our biggest critics are the people who love us, right? The people who, are in our personal space all the time. They will actually tell you what they really think. And if you can like get up enough nerve to say it in front of your mother, your sister, your brother, your boyfriend, or whoever it is, I think that will help you in the long run. and you will then be able to get up in front of a huge audience, right? But I think for people who really are deathly afraid, you need to start with a small audience and build up from there. And along the way, and I don't know how you do this, but if you can learn to enjoy the process, I think it just becomes that much more much easier than, getting up there thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be horrid. I mean, one of the things that I always say is that, no one truly is an expert at anything, right? And no one knows your book or your life any better than anyone else. So when you're getting up to talk about your book, it is your expertise, it is your subject. And if you can kind of convince yourself of that nobody else here knows more than me about this, I think that also helps in the process.
What helps me a lot personally to add to that, knowing what you're talking about and reminding yourself of it,
Right.
practicing like a good handful of things that you want to say. Like Kyra has a really great pitch for, what her book is about. It's like literally one sentence, but making sure you know what it is and working it into conversation whenever someone asks you about your book, or just practicing those things, so that, because I think what makes people the most nervous and scared is when you're like, oh shit, I've stopped talking. Oh, I haven't said anything in a long time. Oh, am I still silent? Am I still standing up here in front of 300 people not saying anything? Oh crap. And then you just get kind of like stuck in that flight mode, right? So if you know what you're going to say, that can help.
Yeah, I'll just add, I feel like I do actually have a lot of firsthand experience with this, especially in college. I think the best way to get over stage fright, though, is to put yourself out there as much as possible. Because I've noticed that even when I've like forced myself to volunteer for some type of, I don't know, honorary speeches or something that I did in college, I got better at it the more I did it. And definitely practice. Like if you're not prepared for something, you're going to be more nervous for it. So practicing was definitely the biggest thing that helped me too, besides putting myself out there more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other thing too, I was thinking, and I've done this a few times with some public speaking events, but yeah, I think sometimes admitting, like as a way to like break the ice, maybe sometimes admitting to your audience that I'm a little bit nervous right now before you go into depends what kind of event it is, because if it's something like Mackenzie's TED Talk, maybe not the best place to mention that, but if it's more casual, then I think it might be a good way to break the ice and just say, I'm a little bit nervous to talk in front of all of you right now, but here we're gonna go. Let's go. And that and it kind of does break the ice a bit, and I think it also goes back to like the point that we were talking about earlier about like relatability, and it shows that try not to, I guess, take yourself too seriously, and try not to think of this one event as the be all end all. Yeah, I guess that's another thing too, I would say, is sometimes admitting that you're nervous helps your audience, I guess, feel relate to you.
I really like that advice, because getting your audience to react to whatever you're saying is so huge for helping public speaking, because part of the fear is you don't know what they're thinking, and your head goes straight to, they don't like what I'm saying, they hate me, I'm dumb, all the negative things. But if you can get them to react, then you kind of, in a way, are knowing what they're thinking, and it will help you relax. So breaking the ice with comedy, I 10 out of 10 would recommend. But anyway, you can get the audience to react to what you're saying, I think would be hugely helpful.
Right. Just to sort of build off of what Mackenzie's saying there, I'm going to share a very, very quick story. I think that ultimately getting your audience to respond to you is important, because that will ultimately remind you to be present in the moment. I'm going to share this story, but I don't want it to like be scary. But basically, I in general don't really wrestle with stage fright, but for some reason, one time I was giving like a French presentation, and I had note cards in my hand, but I had memorized my script, but weren't allowed to bring the script. We could only have note cards. But suddenly I was in the moment with my French partner, and I just froze because I got so caught up in trying to remember my script. And so like that was terrible. Unfortunately, in that moment, I'm telling you the story. In that isolated incident, I did have a panic attack from my class. That's like worst case scenario.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was like not a good time. But I'm only sharing this moment with you guys because, again, reinforces the idea that we are all human. And a lot of my friends, like the people who were in the class with me, knew that I could do the presentation. French was one of my strongest subjects, and like nobody was like, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing. It's just that in that moment, I allowed my idea of perfection to take me away from the moment of actually like emoting with people. And so that's what, even as somebody who usually does not wrestle with stage fright, like that just shows that any of us can be susceptible to it at times. But ultimately, that means that we need to be willing to, as Mackenzie was saying, be rooted like in the moment and try to get audiences to engage with you. As Elizabeth was saying, like be honest about who you are as a person. Like honestly, if I had just said like at the beginning of the presentation, hi guys, I am nervous for some reason, maybe I wouldn't have like froze up as much as I did. But that was in the past. I was college. I'm good now. And I feel like
lived through it. You lived to tell the tale.
Did. Now I'm not nearly as afraid. Or never, yeah. So we're all good.
So to pivot a little bit, we have another great question in the chat here that I want to ask you guys. So we've talked about actually doing the thing, but how do you get the thing, right? What do you find are the best ways to get in-person events at things like bookstores, libraries, schools, etc.?
So I learned stepping out of your comfort zone is the biggest thing. So I had a speaking engagement at a library that I probably wouldn't have gotten if I didn't go to the library, introduce myself to the events team, and then talk to them about my book, give them a copy, and allow them to like read through it. So if I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have gotten the speaking engagement. So I definitely would say go down there and introduce yourself. Like, even if they say no, you still put in the effort. You still um, show them that, hey, I'm willing to come down here to meet you, to meet you halfway, so to speak. So I would say just introduce yourself and see what happens.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I have found that emailing people works sometimes, but it's definitely more effective to go in person. And even it doesn't always have to be yourself. Like my parents have been a big help in like expanding my book scene in my hometown back in the Midwest, and they've even gotten me into a book fair that way. And so like just having people physically go into the store, the library, it helps to have your book, but if you can just have it pulled up on Amazon too instead and just show them, like it's pretty much that simple, just going up in there.
But also a hack that has really came in handy for me, QR codes. So I've used QR codes to put the Amazon link for my book, or even the Barnes and Noble link for my book. And while I'm talking about it, give them the QR code. Everyone always have their phone on them, so they can just scan it with their phone and the link pops up. So QR codes has gotten me a lot of my business, so to speak. So I would definitely recommend it.
Huh.
Well, all right. Thank you guys so much for those helpful insights. We do have a final prepared question for you guys, but of course, if anyone watching wants to ask a question in the chat, we will pop over and check the chat once again for any more Q&As right after this final question. So, without further ado, what has been your favorite moment of your book journey so far? I mean, you are far from over. Some of you have published fairly recently, and you will be a newly published author for 2 years from your publishing date. So you milk that as long as you want. But what has been your favorite moment of the journey so far?
So I guess I'll answer first. It was a very cool moment. Someone dressed up as my main character for Halloween, and it blew my mind. I was in shock. I'm like, no way. So I ended up talking to the girl who did it for like an hour, but that was like by far my favorite moment.
Yeah, low-key, I would cry. That's so cool.
I think for me, my favorite moment is when actually on a podcast, I sent my book to, it was 4 people hosting the podcast. I sent a book to all 4 of them, so that they would hopefully read it before the podcast was on. It was like the season opener for their particular thing. And when we got on, one of the hosts said, "Oh my God, Traci, I read your book and I loved it. I really felt like it changed my life." And for me, I was like, "Oh, you read it?" Because I mean, I think that, you don't, I don't know about you guys, but when I wrote the book, I wanted people to write it. I knew people were read it, but I knew people were buying it, but I wasn't sure if anybody would read it. And um, I'm normally not like this, but I actually care if people like it, which I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But so having somebody say, "I loved reading it. I loved the conversational style." And then when the woman said, "It changed my life. I did XYZ." And I was like, "Oh my God." So that was a moment for me that kind of was like, kind of touched me.
That's why we write, right?
Right.
That's why we stir the pot.
Good job. Good job.
It's hard for me to pick just one favorite moment. So I guess the top couple, I would say, I definitely think having my hardcover book in my hand was like a really special moment for me, because with the paperback, it was fine. Like, I was excited then, but for some reason I didn't get really excited until I had the hardcover book in my hand. That's kind of when it all felt real for the first time. So that was a really special moment. Nice. And I would definitely agree with like having an actual reader say that they've read it and that they actually liked it, and being a completely unexpected person, like not even just like a friend or a family member, like a completely random person who was just like, "Wow, like I'm so impressed by your book." And I'm like, "Oh my God, like more than my family just likes my book."
Aww.
Yeah, those are great moments.
Yeah, I would agree. It's hard to pick just one favorite moment. But I'm gonna have to say at least 2. Okay, so first I actually want to say this point is what Traci had mentioned earlier, just that so a big goal of mine in the book writing journey was to enjoy something about each part of the process. So that was even my least favorite parts. So that was very important for me. And the other thing I would say, so this is my 2 favorite moments, was so the first one was when I had seen the cover of my book. So after the cover designer had designed it, I actually cried because like it just captured like the vision of my book completely, and And I was
Girl,
just
me
like, "Yo,
too.
this is it." Because it like, and just, you know, the full effect of it also, and just seeing my name on there, like I was just kind of in awe in that moment, because that's when it was like, wow, you know, this is going to be a real thing now. Like this is tangible. Like I can hold this very soon. So that was kind of the a big moment for me. And then similar to not nearly to the same extent as the costume, but I did actually receive fan mail. So one of my fans, it was awesome. So I do love receiving mail, and I do, and actually I do get mail from fans. Still, it's like little letters. But the very first one was really sweet. It was a letter saying that they had really enjoyed my book, and they also sent me a little. It was just like this little puzzle, which was really sweet, and it went with because one of the things I had said in my book was that. You know, we have like a like there are puzzle pieces that people give us in our life's journey that add to like our image of our happiness. So it went with that theme. But so yeah, the fan mail was pretty awesome.
Do you get emails or do you get actual letters?
I do get both. I get emails and letters.
Wow.
Because
I'm jealous.
I attach. The other thing I do is I do keep up a monthly newsletter, and whoever has bought my book, I invite them to be part of the newsletter. And I do have my address as well in the newsletter. So I say, you know, feel free to send me letters or anything you'd like. So they do send me letters.
Girl, you are brave.
Yeah. So yeah, I like that. Because, and then after I write them back as well. So yeah, but yeah, I think it's, so that, I guess that would be my version of the podcast. I don't have a podcast, but I do think the newsletter is nice. Because it's like, I almost treat it like a mini blog a bit. Yeah.
A newsletter is a great way to keep in touch with your audience.
Yeah, it's keeping in touch with them, because then right after I send out like a newsletter email, they send me something back. You know, they send me messages. So yeah.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time today. Do you have any parting words for our audience?
I guess I would just say, like, know that it's possible to get to where we are and even further. It doesn't really feel like, you know, I think before I even like ran into New Degree Press, I didn't really think that there was any real way to publish a book. And I was like, I don't know where to start. Like, no one's ever going to accept this book and pay me to publish it. And there's just, things are so much different now. Like, you know, it's the 21st century, it's 2021, and there's many other ways to publish a book. So you don't have to rely on just getting picked by a big publisher.
You're so right.
I think it's important for people to know that we all have a story to tell. And if it's fiction, if it's nonfiction, it's a story that somebody needs to hear, right? So I don't think that anyone should look at anyone else and say, oh my God, they wrote a book because they're famous, or they wrote a book because they're so smart. I think that we can.
Traci, you've cut out a little bit, but I agree with your sentiments entirely. And I would encourage anyone who's ever thinking about writing a book, do it. Anyone can write a book. I promise you. We all have a team of people. Oh, there she goes. She's gone. We all have a team of people behind us, helping us throughout the journey. Editors, coaches. No one writes a book alone. And everyone has a story to tell. Traci's absolutely right. Great parting words.
I would say anything's possible, and there isn't a one-way street to publishing. There's many different avenues you can take, and don't let the fear of rejection or the fear of no one ever reading it hold you back to creating something that could potentially be great.
You write it, they will read it.
Amen.
Agreed.
The other thing I thought of too is, I guess, lean into what makes you unique. Because, so for me, like I had thought that like my book, like the vision for my book, I thought, I don't know who's going to publish this because it's just so, it doesn't fit neatly into a category really. It's creative nonfiction, so it's, so it's kind of like a split. But I've been worried about that because I thought, oh, maybe I have to make it this or that, you know? So I think just embracing what is unique about your vision for your book, and also like your own unique personhood, I guess, as well, because then you add those lived experiences in some way, shape, or form in your book. Yeah, whether you realize it or not. So, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, ladies, again so much for your great advice today, your input, for answering all of our questions. I want to thank the audience for attending and asking great questions as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us, guys.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this episode, session, chat about public speaking tips and booking gigs. Get excited for our next talk. We will be talking about... Kyra, what are we talking about?
We'll be talking about leveraging connections and talking about your book offline. Oftentimes we think about books and books on the interwebernets, but you know, there's a world beyond our computers, beyond the internet, in fact. So we're going to have the opportunity to talk with a couple of author experts, etc., who have really pertinent experience in navigating this.
Yes, it'll be a great segue. I love that word, from talking about public speaking tips and booking gigs. So looking forward to seeing you guys again next week. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Bye, y'all.